The Germans almost always play like a well-oiled machine. It's hardly ever about an individual, but always about the team. They play as a unit, and that approach has made them widely successful over the years. They're one of the 3 most successful nations in World Cup history. Join me, and let's go back in time and find out how did they become the World Cup trademark national team that we know of today. The German national team existed since the early 1900s, but they did not feature in the first World Cup tournament in 1930 because the country was hit so badly by the Great Depression and they could not afford to transport the team to Uruguay. But they were in a much better financial space 4 years later. Therefore, they traveled to Italy where they made their first ever World Cup appearance. And what a debut that was! The Germans finished in 3rd place. However, they failed to build on that momentum, crashing out in the first round of the next edition of the World Cup in France in 1938. That was going to be their last World Cup appearance for 16 years, as the Second World War caused the World Cup to be suspended. And when it returned in 1950, well, the Germans had been banned by FIFA. But they were back in 1954, and by then, there were 3 German national teams. Following the Second World War, the Big 3, Britain, the Soviet Union, and the United States, decided that Germany had to be split in order to stop them from waging another war, as they were deemed the cause of both world wars. So, back to football. These different zones operated independently, and they formed 3 national teams: West Germany, East Germany, and Saarland. Saarland acceded to West Germany in 1957 though. For the purpose of this video, we'll refer to West Germany as Germany. The national team qualified for the World Cup in 1954 after having been reinstated as a member of FIFA in 1950. They opened their tournament with a win over Turkey, but then lost 8-3 to the Hungarians captained by Ferenc Puskás. For many, the best player in the world at the time. Puskás scored in that game, but was then injured by a German defender, and that turned out to be a blessing for the Germans later on in the tournament. They had a pretty smooth ride to the final, beating Yugoslavia 2-0 in the quarterfinal and defeating Austria 6-1 in the semi. The Germans qualified for their first ever final in only their 3rd appearance, and they were to face Hungary once again. Puskás had missed the quarterfinal and semis due to that injury he suffered against Germany, but he insisted on playing in the final even though he was not 100% fit. That decision immediately paid off as he scored the opening goal within the first 10 minutes. The Hungarians doubled their lead only 2 minutes later, and it looked like it was going to be a repeat of the landslide victory they enjoyed earlier in the tournament, but it was not meant to be. Max Morlock drew one back in the 10th minute, and Helmut Rahn scored the equalizer in the 18th. The match was very keenly contested, and the team struggled for almost the rest of the game, until the 84th minute when Rahn snatched the winner for the Germans, pulling off the shock of the tournament, which was later named the Miracle of Bern after the capital of Switzerland where the match was played. Germany became world champions for the first time, and the 3rd country win the coveted prize. In the following edition, they finished 4th after losing the semis to hosts Sweden and then the 3rd place playoff to France. In 1962, Germany sank even lower, crashing out in the quarterfinal. That outing made the Germans go back to the drawing board. The following year, the Bundesliga was founded, and that facilitated the development of young talent. A new manager was also hired for the national team, and rebuilding began immediately. By the 1966 World Cup, the Germans had a new-looking team ready to compete, and compete they did. They topped their group and went on to beat Uruguay and the Soviet Union in the quarterfinal and semifinal respectively to make it to their first final since 1954. They were going to face hosts England. Germany opened the scoring with a goal in the 12th minute, but the English quickly leveled things up just 6 minutes later. It remained all square until the 78th minute when England went a goal up. The hosts looked like they were going to snatch the trophy in regular time, but Wolfgang Weber had other ideas. He scored an 89th minute equalizer and sent the game into extra time. The Germans were giving another lifeline. But that lifeline was snatched in the closing minutes of the first half of extra time when Jeff Hurst scored one of the most controversial and infamous goals of World Cup history. The ball bounced down from the crossbar, and the linesman said the ball completely crossed the line. Therefore, the goal was given. However, replays show that the ball actually did not fully cross the line. England would end up meeting their karma 44 years later, but that day was to be their day, as Hurst scored another goal in the last minute of extra time and won England their only World Cup title till date. In the following edition, Germany had their revenge on England, knocking them out in the quarterfinal, but they went on to lose in the semis to Italy in what remains one of the greatest games in World Cup history. Italy scored in the 8th minute and led for almost the entirety of the game. In fact, they must have thought they had made it through to the final in regular time until a 92nd minute equalizer from a very unlikely source. Karl-Heinz Schnellinger, who played as a defender for the Italian giants AC Milan, had never scored for club or country. The extra time started with the Germans on the front foot. Gerd Müller put them ahead with a goal in the 94th minute, but that lead didn't last because Burnick equalized for Italy only 4 minutes later. Then, Gigi Riva went on to give the Italians a lead just before the end of the first half of extra time. Gerd Müller scored again in the second half of extra time to level the scores yet again. But while we were still watching the replay of Müller's goals on live television, Gianni Rivera went on to score the game winner for Italy. With 5 goals scored in extra time, that match still holds the record for the most goals scored in extra time of a FIFA World Cup match, and has been referred to as many as the game of the century. Germany finished 3rd in that tournament, with Gerd Müller winning the Golden Boot. The next World Cup was scheduled to be hosted in Germany for the first time, and they were determined to give a good account of themselves in front of their home fans. Franz Beckenbauer was made first team captain in 71, and he led the team to European glory in 72. Therefore, as hosts and European champions, Germany were prime favorites going into the 1974 World Cup. And it was very interesting because the first group stage, we saw a politically charged game between East and West Germany. The East Germans came out with a slender victory in that game, but it was the Federal Republic of Germany that made it all the way to the final. There, they faced one of the best players and managers in the world in Johan Cruyff and Rinus Michels respectively. The Dutch had invented a new dazzling style which was named total football, and the Germans had a taste of the brutality of that style in the final. The Dutch scored in the 2nd minute of the match, and by the time they put the ball in the back of the net, no German had touched the ball. They were honestly being mesmerized, but they were given a lifeline. A pretty controversial penalty in the 25th minute was converted, and the game seemed to be balanced out. Gerd Müller then went on to put the Germans ahead with 2 minutes to go to halftime with what would be his last goal for the German national team. That goal was enough to make Germany world champions for the 2nd time, and Müller the record holder for the most goals in World Cup history. Beckenbauer lifted the trophy that night for the Germans. Little did he know, 16 years later, he would complete a feat that no one had ever been able to achieve. After such a high, they sank to a pretty low. The Germans did not just fail to successfully defend the title, they failed pretty badly, crashing out in the 2nd group stage in 1978. Following that shambolic outing, the manager retired and his assistant, Job Derwall, took over. Derwall led Germany to European glory yet again in 1980, and took them to another World Cup final in 1982. Although not without controversy. The first round game between Germany and Austria was termed the disgrace of Gijón because of the allegations of match fixing, which, of course, FIFA denied. In 1984, Franz Beckenbauer was hired as the manager after an embarrassing outing in the Euro. He then led the team to another World Cup final where they lost to Maradona-inspired Argentina. That meant that the Germans had lost in back-to-back World Cup finals. That is more than enough to crush anyone's spirit. But the Germans did not let it break them. The next edition of the World Cup was to be hosted by Italy, the country where the Germans made their first ever World Cup appearance. And the Germans were determined to make it special. Beckenbauer had a well-oiled machine at this time, which was led by Lothar Matthaus, the first man to win the FIFA World Player of the Year award. They beat England in the semi-final to get into their 3rd final in a row. There, they had their revenge on Argentina. beating them 1-0 to win the World Cup for the third time. With that, Beckenbauer became the first person in history to win the FIFA World Cup as both captain and manager. After that tournament, he retired and was succeeded by Berti Vogts. The year 1990 was very significant for German football and Germany as a whole. In addition to the World Cup victory, 1990 was the year that East and West Germany unified. The newly reunified German national team played their first game on October of 1990. Anyway, after 3 straight finals, Germany seemed to experience burnout, going just as far as a quarterfinal in both 94 and 98 editions. Qualification for the 2002 World Cup wasn't an inspiring one either. For the first time, Germany failed to qualify for the World Cup directly, so they were not favorites going into that tournament. But thanks to their defensive superiority, and particularly Captain Oliver Kahn, they were able to keep 5 clean sheets in 6 games and made it all the way to the final again. But then, they were met with the immense brilliance of the 2002 Brazil national team with Ronaldo Fenomeno, who scored 2 goals that night and make La Canarinha champions for a record 5th time. But regardless of losing that final, Oliver Kahn was awarded the Golden Ball and became the first goalkeeper ever to win that award at a World Cup. The following edition was hosted in Germany, and prior to that tournament, things weren't looking so great for the Germans. First of all, new manager Klinsmann stripped Kahn of captaincy and relegated him to the bench. And that didn't do Germany's performance any favors, as they dropped 22nd in the FIFA rankings going into the tournament. They, however, picked up once the tournament started and finished 3rd on home soil with their striker Miroslav Klose winning the Golden Ball. After that tournament, Klinsmann resigned and Joachim Löw was promoted to head coach. Under Löw, Germany finished 2nd at the 2008 Euros, and they pretty much walked into the semis of the 2010 World Cup. They beat England 4-1 in the round of 16 after Frank Lampard's legitimate goal was ruled out by the ref. Historical irony after the 1966 final. And in the quarterfinal, they defeated a Messi-inspired and Maradona-led Argentina 4-0. But they fell to eventual winners, Spain, in the semis, and had to settle for 3rd place after defeating Uruguay in the playoff match. Their youngster Thomas Müller won the Golden Boot as well as the Best Young Player award. Now, after 3 consecutive semi-final appearances, Germany were determined to go all the way again in Brazil 2014, and they started brilliantly. They beat Ronaldo's Portugal 4-0 in the group stage in a game many dubbed as the team of all the talents against the team of the talent. They cruised all the way to the quarterfinal, where they defeated France to make it to a 4th consecutive World Cup final appearance. And that semi-final game, till date, remains one of the most unforgettable games in World Cup history. Germany humiliated Brazil in front of their home fans. And as if that was not enough, Klose scored against Brazil on Brazilian soil to break the record held by a Brazilian legend and become the player with the most goals in World Cup history. Germany would, however, do Brazil a favor in the final by stopping rivals Argentina from winning the World Cup on Brazilian soil. Germany had started the tournament playing against Cristiano Ronaldo's team and ended it playing against Lionel Messi's team. People dubbed that final as the matchup between the world's best player against the world's best team. That was a landmark win in that it made Germany the first European team to win a World Cup on South American soil and the 2nd European team to win it outside of Europe. It also meant that since their first victory in 1954, Germany have won the World Cup every other decade. But in 2018, they fell to the World Cup winner's curse, crashing out on the group stage for the first time in 80 years. 2 years later, Löw resigned and was succeeded by former Bayern boss Hansi Flick. Under Flick, Germany have re-emerged. They were the first team to qualify for the 2022 World Cup in Qatar and have been drawn in a group they are expected to qualify from, with Spain, Costa Rica, and Japan. Will Germany be able to equalize Brazil's record by winning their 5th World Cup in Qatar this year? What do you think?